Hello, Horror Hounds. Earlier on this morning, one of you, hello Kiki, asked me a very reasonable question. When are you going to review some more episodes of Freddy's Nightmares? It's something that I've left for way too long. And I'll level with you. The reason I stopped is because I started watching episode 13, loathed it, had to go and do something else, and time passed, and I realised that if I wanted to uh, start doing these again, I'd have to rewatch it again and could never quite bring myself to do it. But you asked a reasonable question: when? As it happens, I've got a little time off work for the rest of the week, so I thought, do you know what, damn it, today. So season 1 episode 13, Deadline. As you might have guessed then, not the strongest episode. As it happens, as chance would have it, on second viewing, I actually liked it more than I did the first time, the first segment. I never got round to watching the second segment. We follow Peter during his summer vacation. He wants to be a creative writer, but his dad owns the Springwood Gazette, so gets him a summer job on the paper. So it's sort of like, although we never see the dad, it's a story of parents controlling their children and the children wanting something different for their lives than the parents want, but he's stuck during the summer on this job when what he wants to do is go and travel and experience things for his creative writing, but he's left doing the obituaries. What happens is when he's writing the obituaries, he sort of goes into his own sort of fantasy land, which is very similar to the dreamscape of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and he imagines himself in the place of the people whose obituaries he's writing while they're dying. One point of interest early on in the episode, which sort of kickstarts the whole thing, is that his friends turn up to work and they start having a conversation, and Freddy Krueger gets mentioned. I mean, they're talking about being 17 and the whole of their life ahead of them, and someone comments, you're never too young to die in Springwood. Remember Freddy Krueger. And he brings up Freddy's file, and even though we all know that he was killed by the parents and that was covered up, his file officially says he's missing, presumes dead, and has been missing now for a number of years. So whilst this TV series has a vague relation to the movies, I guess you could say that we're still maybe a few years before the events of the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. The guy takes Freddy's name in vain to an extent, this kid Peter, and Freddy basically thinks, right, fuck you, and starts the fantasies he has of the obituaries he's writing. Freddy starts to play with them and make them nastier, make him feel it more, and as each story goes on, he feels less and less able to break out of them. And so, exactly like with the Nightmare on Elm Street movie, he thinks that if he doesn't get himself out of the story while he's writing the obituary before the person he's writing about dies, then he'll die in their place. And there is a weird sort of uneasy fear of growing up and getting a job and being a slave to the job, and you can kind of tell that the writer's coming at it from the adult side of things, writing for the kid, and maybe he's harkening back to some of the freedoms of childhood and thinking, don't grow up too fast, kid, because we've all got to work to make a crust and earn a living and pay the tax man, and it's not fun. So there's a little bit of axe grinding going on there. It gets very on the nose at the end because he literally goes into a sort of board game called The Ladder to Success, which is a little like, I don't know if you ever played the Game of Life board game. So he's literally on an enormous board game, rolling dice and asking the banks for loans and foreclosing and going bankrupt and stuff like that. And yeah, grown-up life is very scary. And finally, he's given a suicide to write, and ultimately he dies in a fashion that seems to his obituary will be written in that paper, the irony is, as though he committed suicide himself. So, boom, 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 done and dusted that one. The second half of the episode, because they're usually interlinked, it starts off bang with the Springwood Gazette and the front page news of a couple of co-eds who died in a car crash. They're friends of Peter's, the guy from the first one. One of them's actually his girlfriend. So straight after the break, boom, she's dead, and we follow their friend Emily, who was supposed to have gone to the party with them and was supposed to have been in the car with them, so would have died with them, except she was on a date with an older boyfriend, a college boyfriend called Johnny. And this one's really sort of all over the place. I kind of like it, but it is, narratively, it is all over the place. There's lots of dreams within dreams. It's a very circular narrative. I think she's in the sort of dreamscape for the most part of her segments. I think Jacob's Ladder, only nowhere near as sophisticated as the sort of narrative model that Jacob's Ladder has. She's obviously got survivor's guilt. There are hints that she's attempted suicide because she thinks she should have died with her friends. But she's really being attacked here for no good reason. She writes her innermost thoughts in her diary, and she says that she wishes she'd died with her friends. So, yeah, she expresses all the kind of survivor guilt and grief processing that anyone would expect to do, except in this weird sort of drug-induced sort of dreamscape, because she's being kept drugged up to the nines because of a supposed suicide attempt. She's then visited by her dead friend who try and get her to go to the party, and then is kept being visited by her dream lover, Johnny, who does a really nice line in sleazy boyfriend through to psychotic at the end. And you sort of always know what's going to happen. She's always going to keep finding herself back, having to choose between Johnny and her friends, and whether she goes in the car with them and dies or doesn't and loses them. And I guess there's a thing there somewhere about growing up and moving apart from friends. It's kind of nice while it plays out, but it doesn't really bear too much analysis. You kind of get the impression that this struggle with deciding that she wants to live is something that she has daily, and it's actually quite a downer. She's done absolutely nothing wrong. She just didn't go to a party with her friends who had a car accident and died, and it's quite nasty actually. But that's episode 13 out of the way now. It's done. So we can move on to episode 14, which is called Black Tickets and stars one Mr. Bradley Pitt. Okie dokie, so episode 14 is called Black Tickets. If anyone knows the significance of that, please let me know in the comments down below, because I can't work it out to save my life. But it does star Brad Pitt, which makes it a little bit of a curiosity. As we all know, fans of Nightmare on Elm Street, Johnny Depp got his big screen start in Nightmare on Elm Street, and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise as a whole has got an awful lot of alumni who went on to become more famous. Just off the top of my head, Lawrence Fishburne and Patricia Arquette. So we can add a young Brad Pitt to that cast list. He stars as Rick with his girlfriend Miranda, well, wife actually, because at the start of the episode they've run away from home, they've eloped, and their car has broken down just inside the city limits of Springwood, where the rest of the story plays out. This episode is really a tale of two halves. The first half, the A story, is a hell of a lot of fun. The B story is weird and very preachy, just a little bit nasty. So let's stick with the fun for the moment. Again, it's another episode about the fear of growing up. They've decided to run away, and really Freddy and Fate and Springwood and whatever the hell the force is in this TV series that works on these people, a sort of malicious Twilight Zone type force, says to them basically, right, you've decided you're grown up enough to run your own lives, fuck you, no one's going to help you, you have to do absolutely everything on your own. Brad Pitt's character wants to run away, always wants to run from all of his problems, and wants to run away and get married, and in the end literally wants to go on the run, and his new bride has a change of heart and wants to go back home and sort of face the objections of their parents and make a life for themselves, and stuff like that. It will be no surprise where, to anyone who's familiar with this series at all, when very, very close to the start of the episode, Brad Pitt's character gets hit by a truck, and then so they have to call for help, and they find themselves in a motel and the like. It will be a surprise to absolutely no one to find that when at the very end of this segment they've stolen a car and are on the run, and his wife says to him, "Stop running before you kill yourself," that it's him who runs himself over with the car. This is a show that plays with time and reality. It's very fast and loose with reality and dream sequences and the like. Even it plays so much more fast and loose than the film series ever did. You can never ever be quite sure whether what you're watching is real, a dream sequence, a fantasy sequence in someone's head, a dream within a dream. You just have to kind of go with it. Brad Pitt does well in this. There's obviously a star quality there, even if it is a cheap as chips episode of a cheaply made TV show. There's something there. The real kick for me, though, I've got to be honest with you, is when the tow truck comes. The tow truck guy is played by Bill Moseley, who is, amongst many, many other things, Chop Top in the superb Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. In this, he's playing a character called Buzz, which I'm going to take as a very, very self-conscious homage to his work in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So he's playing a character called Buzz, who rides up and down Route 66 looking for people who have broken down, and then takes them to his brother's motor lodge, the Route 66 motor lodge. And there's a little section there in the middle of this episode where it feels a little bit like Freddy meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or at the very least Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and Tobe Hooper's follow-up film, sort of Death Trap, about the motel, that has a sort of TCM feel. Mosley's very much channeling his Chop Top character. The brothers aren't in it enough. I thought it was going to go full-on Texas Chainsaw. Unfortunately, it didn't go there, but there was just enough of a flavour there to lift the whole thing. You will see in the dream sequences in the first section, you'll see Brad Pitt get shot in the thigh with an arrow by a Cupid statue come to life that then taunts him, and you'll see him pulling his arm and hand stripped of flesh out of a jacuzzi full of piranha. It's a hell of a lot of fun, even if it's, well, compared to the second half, it is a bit preachy. The voice of this episode definitely feels like the voice of the parents talking to the kids. You have to grow up. You have to face up to your responsibilities, and if you run, bad things will happen to you in the world. There's an actual line from the movie, from the episode. Sorry, I wrote it down. He phones his dad to try and get some help, but they both phone their parents, but their parents have cut them off. And the answer machine message his dad leaves is, "The real world is going to bury you." And that's very much the message of the first half. In the second half, you find out that they're both okay. He's recovering from his automobile accident where he ran himself over. Logic goes out the window. It doesn't matter. They've settled down, and Miranda especially has got a job that she loves. The start of a career that she's going to have to work hard at. This whole second segment is about motherhood and a pregnancy scare, and I'm convinced is designed purely to work as hard as possible to scare teenage girls out of getting pregnant. She's got a female boss who flat out tells her that motherhood and a career are incompatible. This aired in '89, and it's acknowledged that if she falls pregnant, the boss has to give her maternity leave, but that's it. Her career prospects once she gets back are over. She'll no longer be fast-tracked. And the rest of the episode is just a whole bunch of segments, literally about a fear of becoming a mother and losing your identity. I mean, the poor girl gets arrested by the police in these dream sequences and put in an interrogation room and a sleep deprivation unit for teenage mothers, literally to just try and scare her out of the notion that she could possibly be anything other than a horrendously bad mother because she's so young. It's so strange. It's the cop, again a female cop, interestingly enough, tells her, you've given birth to your own replacement. Your life is over. And at the end, she does a pregnancy test and discovers that she's not pregnant. And while she's celebrating and jumping on the bed, she slips and hits her head. And as a result of the head trauma or some kind of or the psychological trauma, what's happened up till then, the doctors can't tell which, she's reverted to a childhood state herself. So she's permanently childish. So the episode as a whole seems to punish these kids for wanting to grow up, and as punishment for them wanting to grow up, forces them through psychological trauma and physical head trauma. At least one of them, the wife, to live in a permanent state of mental childhood. It's bizarre. It's so bizarre. It's really conservative and really prescriptive, and it reminded me a little of The Dream Child, which is one of the nightmare movies about falling pregnant and choosing to keep the baby or have an abortion, and you're too young to know what you want type stuff. And I'm really not, that film didn't do particularly well. I happen to really like it, but the argument was that the teenage crowd it was aimed at really didn't want to see a film about teenage pregnancy, and I'm not really sure how the teenage audience would have taken to this particular episode. It's such a strange one, but at least it's got a consistent message. At least it's not a rambling mess like the previous one was. I happen not to agree with the message of this one, but honestly, for Brad Pitt alone, it would make it a curiosity worth seeking out. The fact that Bill Moseley's in it, kind of reprising his Chop Top role in a way, is just the icing on the cake. It's the little glacé cherry at the top of the Bakewell tart for me. So a nice little curiosity of an episode, and welcome back to the Freddy's Nightmares review series. I'll try and keep the momentum up. Thanks for calling me out on it, Kiki, and getting me back in the Freddy saddle. That doesn't make